Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that discusses financial topics for families, retirees, and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Advisory Alpha. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Advisory Alpha may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
Welcome back to the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with the one, the only Ross Marinell. How you doing this morning, buddy?
Hey, Michael. How you feeling, man? It's been a long week of rain here in the Carolinas. I'm ready for some sunshine.
It's been, I kind of quit counting it. What are we, like two? I feel like it's been 2 or 3 weeks of just, consistent rain.
It really
rain
has,
and
but,
cold.
But hey, we have power. We have water. I guess we can't be complaining given where the rest of the country is at.
This is true. Texas is really going through it right now.
Yeah. So, let's get rolling because I had a stat I wanted to share with you from the Super Bowl and also relate it back a little bit to what's happening in our financial planning world these days.
Yeah.
So this surfaced shortly after the game. So of course, Kansas City versus Tampa Bay, Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, with his 7th Super Bowl. But during the game, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback for the Chiefs, ran for 497 yards during the game. The only problem is only 33 of those were forward progress. The other 497 was him running for his life while the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defenders were chasing him, whether it's ended up in a sack or an incomplete pass or whatever.
Right.
But the man ran almost 500 yards. The problem is, like I said, only a small percentage of that was forward progress. And so we were chatting a little bit about kind of what the experience is of sitting down with especially a younger couple, and kind of getting up to speed on their financial journey. And some people feel that way about their own kind of finances, right? Is that there's a lot of activity. They're aggressively trying, just sort of running a little bit in circles, kind of chasing their own tail and not making a lot of forward progress. And I think that's really where the intervention of, a good financial planner, someone who really cares about getting into the details, can be helpful, right? Because we almost act as an offensive lineman, right? We're there to block. We're there to kind of create a pathway forward that hopefully can allow that couple to more in a straightforward line achieve their goals. And so I want to get your feedback on that, but also kind of relate it back to what's happening in the financial headlines over the last couple of weeks, which has very much been about stock positions and just sort of excitement around, very volatile price movement. So interject, and then I'll kind of want to continue this and finish this analogy a little bit.
I think that the statistic is crazy to think I watched the game, so I know what happened. I mean, he was running for his life most of the game, and, hat tip to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense and their defensive coordinator, because they laid bare the blueprint to beat Kansas City, and we were chatting about this offline about, all the weapons and the talent that Kansas City has. And you're just looking at all that eye candy they have on the offensive side of the ball, and they can't hurt you if they can't get the ball. And so it seemed to be like they're going to just make Mahomes run for his life. And they did that. Yeah. To relate it to what's going on in the marketplace today, it's really interesting because we're just kind of in this place where we're seeing some really what I think to be are like behavioral experiments, behavioral finance, investor psychology coming to life and happening in real time. Stuff that we read about in textbooks, or people like Dr. Daniel Crosby or Dr. Brad Klontz, or some of these people that write about this stuff incessantly. It's happening like right in front of our face. The case studies are living and breathing right now, and it's fascinating, but it's also alarming because it really shows, in my opinion, the disconnect that a lot of people have from having sound financial advice and their actions, what they do with their money. There's a huge void there, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. And the way I would relate this football analogy is, so you have a great quarterback who's got all the talent in the world. They have unbelievable skill players, which in this sense sort of relates back to like a stock. You could have a great idea. There could be this opportunity in front of you. But if we don't have the time or the plan to actually get the ball to them, what difference does it make? Yeah, if there's a great skill player, like we said, you could have Jerry Rice on your team, but if you don't have an offensive line that's blocking for you long enough for him to get downfield, what difference does it make? He's not, it's not going to be the positive outcome that you hope for. And a lot of what I'm just kind of, trying to get my head around, the mindset of some of the participants in this, right? Which is they see opportunity. They see other people in their life making money. They see the stories about people going from, maybe a small few, a couple $1,000 account to something more significant. Obviously they want to be a part of it. It's natural, right? I mean, you want that success. You don't want to see someone else succeeding in an investing world when you don't get to be a participant in it. But we've forgotten some of the basic fundamentals of just sound financial guidance, and just really a sound financial plan for yourself is just an individual trying to save for emergencies, and save in your retirement plan to reduce your taxable income, to maybe prepare something for your children to have a pathway to get through college. And you think about all the things that we do with our money, and so much attention is put on just speculating that we're missing. I think the big picture here, like I'm trying to figure out, like, what's the story we're going to learn from all of this speculative talk over the last 2 months?
Well, I have a ton of thoughts to share. The first one that I would say is, and I'm not in any way laying blame, I am simply trying to highlight the fact that a lot of people still do not recognize or understand the business model of our media. The media is, we think they purport to the public that their job is to inform. I think their job is, almost like, edutainment, infotainment. I mean, how boring would it be if, we had like a Walter Cronkite on TV now, just giving out, here's the news. Every show, it's like commentary, opinion, there's a slant to it. People are going to think I'm being political. I'm talking about money just as much as I'm talking about everything else. And the media machine needs eyeballs. And so what do? They are going to pick the extreme stories, the stuff that's attention grabbing. Think about how noisy the world is. Just, in your, we carry around our smartphones that ding us and notify us. I mean, we could have it like hit us every 5 minutes. I mean, my thing buzzes if somebody comes to my door. I get text messages, I get voicemail indicators. I mean, that's a nonstop thing. And so how do you break through and catch someone's attention in a world where attention is so like fleeting? You go with the extreme stuff. So when you have a story like GameStop, where, that whole scenario takes place, the media like hyper focuses on that because that's what everybody's paying attention to and what's going on. And then next thing you know, your buddy that you run into at the grocery store is like, hey, like, what's going on with this GameStop thing? I mean, everybody just knows, right? And then what they do is they show the guy that's, took his $50,000 bet, and let's just be real about it. It was a bet, smart guy, but it was a bet. And that thing turned it into, millions, right? And everyone's like, oh man, I want to do that. I want to, and they want to be, like you said, they want to be part of that narrative. And what's going to happen now is the media, now that the run up has happened and the air is coming out of the balloon, the media is now going to turn their attention to all the people that just got obliterated on the downside, because that's the other extreme, and it gets people's eyeballs again.
I'll jump in here with this, because some of this forms outside of the purview of the mainstream media, right? They come in at the tail end when it's bubbled up to the top. But a lot of this speculation happens in private chat rooms, or in, let's say, off the beaten path of the mainstream media, right? So whether it's a Reddit forum or some other, place where people can come together and share ideas. So it's not just the mainstream media that starts it. I certainly think they want to push it to, the upper limits, right? Because it is fear-based. I'm a firm believer the market is driven on fear. We say fear and greed. I think it's fear of missing out and fear of loss. That's my perspective. Mm-hmm. The media loves fear. So if they can express that as you missed out on this versus you lost it, that works for them too, in my opinion, right? That's just me. But I think some of this is coming in from the way the trade works, as we explained in the last podcast, is a unification in one direction, right? Which is we're all piling into a uniform trade forward on, let's say, driving a particular stock ahead. The challenge is, and what I'm seeing is, they don't all have uniform financial circumstances, right? So the individuals who start with this idea, maybe they're in a really well-rounded financial situation where they can afford to speculate 5 or 10% of their net worth on an idea that maybe becomes, the rocket ship to the moon that they talk about. Mm-hmm. The question is, like, when it's uniform idea and trade, but it's not uniform financial circumstances, right? So somebody might be risking their entire life savings when someone else is risking 2% of their net worth. They're making the same trade, but the risks that they're experiencing, if it fails, is really broad. And that does surface it back up to those forums, right? Because we've seen the story scanning through about the tales of people losing literally about tens of thousands of dollars, their life savings. They're going to restart. We've seen the stories about people borrowing money to go into the stocks, lose a significant portion of their investment, and now have a debt they have to repay. And, that's kind of where I'm going back to, like, it's not about the skill player just only. It's got to be the full team.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think, I just saw the article, I think it posted this week, where there was a security guard who took out a loan to speculate in the GameStop, frenzy, and just got obliterated. He lost like 85%, and now he's on the hook for, that plus. And, while I think that there are multiple issues at play. One is just basic financial literacy and the lack of teaching that. Another is, and you mentioned this fear of missing out. I think that people, in a large part, have a distorted view of what the real story is. And what I mean by that is, whoever you are looking at, you almost with a certainty do not know the real story. Like, so if someone's on one of these social media platforms and they're taking screenshots of their gains in the market or their money or their investing, maybe that person's worth $5 million. And they're playing around with, money that, quite frankly, is piddly to them, but it looks significant to you. And you're thinking like, oh man, I want to be like this person. Or the opposite could also be true. You could be watching somebody in real time doing some of the dumbest things, and you think that, that they're killing it. And, this market, the kind of market that we've been in for the last, almost rolling 12 months here, when we start pushing up into March, this is the kind of market where it just breeds overconfidence, because we had that sharp downturn, which was a byproduct of, the fear of the virus, the government shutdowns, all this uncertainty. And then the market has recovered amazingly, in a way that most people would have never predicted the recovery pricing wise to happen. And people that bought in and got that, I mean, if you bought something, you should have done pretty well, and then what happens is we play this comparison game, like, oh, well, I just did, I'm only up 50% in this position, and you're seeing people that are up 200% in another, like, you made 50% return in less than a year. And you're going to like be upset about that because you're looking at someone else and comparing. And so I think that there are just so many interesting parts that are interweaving right now. I mean, there's lack of literacy. There's a huge lack of just discipline, sell discipline, people not being willing to take profits, and they're treating the market like it's a casino. And then there's people that like have this overconfidence, and you got the chat forums and that group think where everyone's in there cheering each other on, like, yeah, we can do this. Like we can take on the machine. And I mean, history just doesn't prove that that's a strategy for long-term success. Yes, we see glimmers and we see flashes in the pan where things have a huge run up, and there are winners, but there are also losers. And that's what, kind of going back to the original point, the media is going to highlight the stories that draw the most eyeballs. So if that's talking about the winners, like, oh man, this guy turned, and then they'll pivot, and then they'll be talking about, oh, maybe we need more controls because people are like throwing themselves on grenades. And, and they will laugh all the way to the bank with people clicking on their sites and reading their stories because that's their business model. So that's kind of my thing, is like, if you're trying to discern what's going on by watching the media and getting your information, that's infotainment. It's, you need to get more clear about like what's important to you. And like, to your point, Ross, how does this work in your financial plan? Like, what is, what is this speculation going to do? I mean, do we really think that, you're going to take $500, day trade your way out of paying out a $40,000 student loan debt? I mean, it's possible, but is that really likely? Probably not. So maybe we need a better plan.
So, you shared a lot there. I mean, but basically that's kind of my point. It's like, are we going to just sit here and talk about potential stock opportunities, or are we going to talk about the basic blocking and tackling scheme of what it means to become financially independent, to build wealth, that it's slow? The way we used to talk about accumulation, it just seems so archaic, right? Yeah. You're building a slow savings pool. Obviously in your 20s, maybe you have less opportunity to save because you're starting your career, you're building your income base, you're starting to take on debt for the, so you're paying back student loans or auto loans, you're growing, expanding, you're living independently. And then that changes. And yeah, maybe it takes 30 years to save a significant sum of money. And that used to be okay. That's kind of how we used to talk about it, right? That Vanguard started on this very idea. Was
well, I'll use your football analogy, right? So when I play, I was fortunate when I was in high school, and a lot of the guys that, I played football with were extremely talented, and we had good teams. We just had good teams when I was in high school. But what I remember is when we'd be in practice and coach, and they would be showing like a new play, like, oh, we got this new play, and, and it's a play that's kind of designed to get us in the end zone, right? We're going to score, and we know the players on the team, and we'd start running it and executing it, and you get this buzz on the practice field, like, oh, dude, when we bring this out, it's 6, it's guaranteed. Everyone gets excited about that. No one gets excited about how you take the ball from like the 20-yard line to the other 20 to get in the red zone. No one gets excited about like, hey, we got to grind this out for 80, 90 yards to get ourselves in position to score. No one gets pumped up about that.
Here you go. I had a great conversation with a retired NFL punter. And I sort of made the joke mistakenly. I was like, oh, it's got to be like one of the greatest jobs in the NFL. And he thought I was kind of knocking the game or the skill of punting. And I was more just talking about how long you could play if
Yeah.
you were good. I was more
Yeah.
like, man, that's awesome because you could play for 20 years if you're good. And he proceeds to tell me how teams that don't value the kicking game really put themselves in a bind because their starting field position changes, right? So instead of starting, let's say maybe you don't pin your opponent back inside the 5-yard line and they get the ball back on, that's a touchback. You just gave them 15 yards.
Yeah.
Because you didn't prepare or plan for the kicking game. So, I mean, to that point, I do think that's part of it, but this is also goes back to our gambling culture, right? Which is the idea of making money is more sizzling, it's more entertaining than actually going through the process of making money. It's the hope, the idea of making money.
Yeah.
And the way we talk, I've kind of related this idea of the surge into the GameStop mania. Not all that much different than the original surge into Bitcoin back in 2018, when we were living history at that point. We knew it in real time. Like, this is a historic mania and we're living it. And I think this was the same, and I kind of relate it back to this idea of like, we play the Powerball, but most people don't play until the size of the balance gets so high that it's just an eye-popping amount of money, right? Like maybe it's over, like, and there's statistics that bear this out, that the sales go through the roof when the total prize money reaches over $500 million. Right. And it's like, oh, well, now it's something else. So then everybody kind of rushes in, maybe similar to this idea, like GameStop story bubbles up to mainstream media, and then it's out there, and then people start to get spreads. Right. But I think there's a misconception too, because, not from a side, but just like, so is winning $50 million in the Powerball not going to change your life? Like, it has to be five. Like, what's the difference? Like, why does that happen to us where, if most of us won $10 million, that would be a life-changing amount of money, but it doesn't catch our attention because for whatever reason, it just doesn't give us that drive.
Well, it's, to kind of use that same analogy, the lottery is like one of those things where you can't win if you don't play. And I think that when you consider how a lot of the new technology trading platforms and the apps are gamifying trading. I was talking about this just last night with somebody. I said, everyone's got their angle. Robinhood had their thing, and they were free trades, and they were democratizing finance, and they were the cool hip trading app. And then you get other ones out there, and like now we've got Public, which is just doing some really cool things as a trading app platform. And it's Public is kind of incorporating elements like social media, like you can see on there, and people have the ability to share their portfolios, not their like actual weightings and all that stuff, but you could show what someone owns, and it's kind of creating like social proof for some of these companies. And you've got StockTwits, which is like a whole platform where people can get on there. I mean, it's just, it's neat in a sense, but when you're chatting with somebody in a chat room, like, you don't know who you're talking to. Like, there's people that could put together these like very articulate arguments, and
well, the anonymous
don't know a boot from a flip-flop when it comes to investing.
So maybe they're posting their actual gains or losses. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just want to be a part of the story. Who knows? Even the individual that was kind of the center point of this GameStop trade, from what I've read, he had a chartered financial analyst designation.
That's what I was getting ready to say. This guy, he was a CFA. This wasn't like a basement dweller. This is a guy who, actually, like, well, one, sadly for him, he worked for a financial services company while he was doing all this. So he's going to have probably some legal repercussions. But this wasn't just like your basement regular guy. This was somebody who had actually like put in some grease, some elbow grease into understanding investing.
So that's right. And he was at least a knowledgeable of the investment world, because the CFA designation is not easy to obtain. That takes some real intense knowledge and effort, and they just don't hand those out. So that's tough.
Right.
I wanted to go back though to one point here. I thought Jim O'Shaughnessy made a great point. He said there's a huge body of research that posits that young men engage in risky behaviors due to evolutionary fitness maximizing strategies. It's so ubiquitous that it's been dubbed the young male syndrome. So basically what he's saying is, this is not out of the ordinary that young people take excessive risk to try and just explore what's possible. And it's just sort of natural. I think the one word that has changed between when we were that age and today is options, and the accessibility of an option that's been provided to young, inexperienced traders through platforms like Robinhood. I'm not just throwing Robinhood under the bus, but they've made those very accessible. And the difference between buying an option and investing directly in a stock is the potential for total loss. If you buy an option, let's say you buy an out of the money option and you're thinking a stock's going to go up and it doesn't in a particular time frame, then you could lose all the money you invested in it.
Right.
If you buy a stock that you think is going to go up and it doesn't, and it just kind of stays flat, you could lose money, but you probably are not going to lose all of your money. It's a big difference in risk taking and figuring out how you are going to grow and develop into saving and accumulating money, right? One is a coin flip almost. And the other is you could skin your knee and bump your head against the wall, but at the end of the day, you're not destroying your wealth at the same pace, or have the risk of potentially destroying your wealth at the same pace.
Yeah. And that's, going back to the comment I made earlier, in this kind of market where you've seen this incredible run up. I mean, if you were buying options, you've likely seen some nice returns. But this market, I don't think anyone would argue that like we're living in like just normal status quo times. I mean, there's constantly something changing and adjusting. So, to me, it's like I think that, it's great on one hand that younger people are discovering investing. I've said online, publicly, and I believe this, that I actually don't mind some of these folks when the stakes are small, skinning their knee, getting punched in the nose a little bit and just learning, because that's how you learn. But I do want to argue against this idea that what that type of behavior is really, a long-term, successful strategy, because, there are professionals that do this for a living that will tell you, like, we hope to be just a little bit better on our wins than we are on our losses. We're not, they're not looking at these, like, oh man, these moonshot type of deals like some of these folks are, as a way. And this is the behavioral psychology of it. I think there are a lot of people that they feel like the game has passed them by. They feel like they are just, behind, and there's no hope for them to like recover and, go on and have a productive life. And they're looking at this as like, this is the casino. This is the lottery ticket that's going to get me out. It's going to pay off my student loans. It's going to pay off my credit cards or whatever. And I'm like, no, like, you have to put a plan in place and start working. And, it might take you 10 years. It might take 15 years of grinding and working, but you can do it. You can do it. I mean, and that's
all right. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
How long have you been practicing jujitsu?
Oh, salt in the wound right there. 10 years, man. Yeah. 10.
The first year, did you want to be a black belt?
The first year,
you were like, man, it'd be great to be a black belt, wouldn't it?
The truth is, and anyone that's a real jiu-jitsu player will tell you, when you're a white belt, all you can think about is being a blue belt. You're just like, I just don't want to be a white belt. And when you get to be a blue belt, this is true. The majority of people that do jiu-jitsu quit at blue belt because they feel like they've accomplished something. It's like, oh, I'm not a white belt anymore. Yes. And then it just kind of fades away.
So there's respect to the progression.
Correct. Absolutely. And the point I was making is that once you're a blue belt and maybe even a purple belt, that's when you start to think like, well, maybe I can be a black belt one day.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to get over that initial hurdle. And a lot of that initial hurdle is mental. And so that's what I'm saying, like with these folks is like, yeah, you might be looking at your neighbor and feel like you're behind. You don't know the real story. You might be watching the news and feel like, oh man, there's no hope for me. I got to go big or go home. You don't know the real story. And so you have to get over your mental hurdles first. Put a plan in place, start working the strategy, start, having some discipline. And then once you break through some of that, then you can start saying, you know what, I can do this. Like I can make it. I can pay this debt off. I can retire. I can start this business. You start to see some things crystallize.
I came across this quote, one of Daniel Crosby's books. This
Dr.
is a quote from Adam Smith from The Money Game. If you don't know who you are, Wall Street is an expensive place to find out. So just putting that out there, right? And I'm not hand-wringing what has happened necessarily, right? I'm not saying, well, our trading should be altruistic and we should be trying to find the perfect price of that. No. I've seen a lot of this, right? It's just silly. Like I'll give you a quote, right? So Bill Gates was on, this is a CNBC article. And he basically was like, the idea that you drive a valuation way, way beyond what is rational, it's hard to see that societally as a good use of time. So societally as a good use of time. Like, were we saying that when the hedge funds were shorting GameStop? That is this societally a good use of time? Like, this hand wringing is nonsense. They're trying to find a way to make money. I understand it. They're trading to make money. In some ways, they're speculating to make money. But this idea that it has to be an altruistic bet, that's insane, because identifying what the correct price of a stock is, good luck. We could talk to 25 different people and get 25 different ways to value a stock.
Right.
And you don't know, and we don't know who's right. So I'm not hand wringing, but I am saying we don't have to gamble our life savings year after year after year.
That to me, that's just spoken like a billionaire. I mean, these folks, listen, at its the very basic premise, you have a group of people online that figured out how to do a short squeeze and they did it and they piled in and it totally was like a left hook that these hedge funds never saw coming and it landed clean. Okay, hat tip to them. Now everybody knows the score, right? So, I mean, let's move on. It wasn't like these people were like looking to crash the market or the economy. There was nothing nefarious in what they were doing. Yes, some of them were greedy. Yes, some of them were like piling in because it was fun. And they were all like, saying, hey, we're taking it to the big person, the big guys on Wall Street. It's that simple and it's nuts and bolts. And like, let's move on with life. We all know what happened, this idea societally good. Give me a break. That's garbage.
I'm with you. The last thing I really wanted to kind of, there's just a little bit of I have some concern over kind of the language that we use for some of these things.
Like what?
Well, so I've been thinking some of the speculation in equating it to gambling. Right. And so if an individual is gambling and you're reading a story about it, whether it's sports gambling, lottery, oftentimes they're referred to as players. Like you're in the game, like you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not what you're doing. You're not playing.
You're
participating. You're consuming. Participants. You're consumers.
Yeah.
You're buying something on the hopes that it's, you hit the magic number. You're not a player. I don't like that. That's it. It's like we're trying to create this activity around making money as if we're on a sports team together. And we make those analogies all the time, right? But I'm like, but we're really not. I'm not Patrick Mahomes, man. I'm trying to create a financial structure that is smart and hopefully can provide something for my family. right? Like if I'm in there, if you're gambling, then you're gambling. But you have a life that needs to be supported by your finances.
Right.
And if those decisions don't make sense for you, then don't do it.
Well, it's kind of going back to like what Jim O'Shaughnessy said, and I mean, he was talking about young men, but when you're a young guy, you're not married, you don't have a lot of those additional responsibilities. Sometimes you just think, hey, and you go all out. I think about from a standpoint of where I see things going, and we've heard this comment made many times, but so many things are being given to consumers now as the free things, freemiums. Stock trading is free. Trade for free if you trade on our platform. You just give us all your data. And so Facebook is like, hey, use the platform for free, post your life on here, do all this stuff. We just want all the data about everything you're doing. People aren't realizing that they are becoming the product, because there is so much money to be made in selling this data. And look at Robinhood. Robinhood's like, hey, free trades, man. Like, you don't pay for a single trade. And what are they doing? Their game was, let's get as many people on this platform as possible trading for free. And then we're going to sell the order flow data to Wall Street, so that Wall Street can basically like use that data to their advantage. That's the game. There is no free lunch, man. There's no free lunch, right? Because that's just not how the system works. And I'm sure that some of these other platforms that are coming out that are, trading platforms, investing platforms, whatever they are, their business models will eventually become known as well, and as a consumer, as you would say, just know what you're dealing with. And if you are okay with that and you're comfortable with it, that's fine. But let's not pretend that, that some of these, to use as Bill Gates's, analogy, that these businesses are just altruistic in their motives, right? They're making money too. And if you don't know how they're making money because everything is free, then you are the product. And that's one of the things that Wall Street always needs. Wall Street needs traders more than they need investors.
Well, it's working because trading is exploding across all the platforms.
Exactly.
Trading stocks has become zero cost per transaction right now. And I don't know that this is healthy. I don't know that this is the best way to create wealth. In a number of cases, in some cases, the best thing to do is with your allocation that's appropriately aligned to you, just be still, right? We don't reward being still. It's boring. It's not entertaining. You don't get excitement out of it from your brains not firing.
Exactly.
Right? In the same way of having massive activity. But I don't know that that's always creating the best potential outcome for people.
You said it best, man.
It's wild. I feel like we're kind of in the throes of another little revolution in how people invest. I don't know that we're making I don't know that we're making the right level of progress.
Well, that's one of the things, and I'll wrap us up with this, but to me, like, that's one of the things why it's so hard, because I think to be, successful long-term, you have to have that ability to kind of unzip yourself from the pulls and nudges and the distractions and the noise and the tyranny of the present, right? Like everything that's going on today, like that's saying, you got to do this. Think about a 30-year-old, and, most 30-year-olds can't even fathom what their life is like at 60. They can't see themselves as a 60-year-old, right? And like our retirement clients, like we're, like when they come to us and they're 60 in their early 60s, we're like, man, you're young. And they're like, what are you talking about? What? I'm not young. And I'm like, no, you're young, because like I have clients that are 90 plus, and they even, so that is like human nature, is like how we're wired. It's like, and to be, in my opinion, to be successful long-term, you have to have, like, yes, there's some things we got to deal with today. And then there's like short term, and there's midterm, and then there's long term. And you got to have an idea about each spot, because yes, we might have a little bit of money that we speculate with in short term and we play with, but we can't let that bucket destroy our long-term plans or our long-term strategies. And those, to me, the long-term stuff is what we got to deal with first, the big rocks first, right? So that's, to me, is where I look at all this going on, is trying to help these younger folks say, look, let's think about like where you want to be in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And I know that that's an abstract concept, but if it forces you to stop and think about it and use some of those neurons in your brain a little bit, you can put together a much better strategy for yourself over the long run than just saying, well, let me log into my Reddit account and see what we're buying today. You know?
All right, man. Well, we'll see what I'm still trying to, like I said, understand what's the lesson we can take away from this that we can be useful going forward. We're still in the throes of this story, because as we speak, as we're recording this, they're about ready to start a congressional hearing about this particular issue. So we'll see what the outcome is, and if there's any information that's useful that's uncovered today. I don't have high hopes, but you never know.
Yeah, I think the lesson is people need to just look in the mirror and know, like, that's who you need to be accountable to when it comes to your financial plan. Is like,
Amen.
What's the best thing for you?
Right.
And forget about everybody else.
Cool.
All right, man.
All right,
Thanks a lot, buddy. For you guys listening, thank you for listening to the show. If you have something you would love us to talk about, email us. Our email address is themoneyhuddle@vcplanning.com. We do get inquiries about being on the show. If you got a guest or somebody you think we should talk to on the show, feel free to reach out. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.